Yesterday, you probably argued with someone on Reddit, but they weren't real. I'm talking about synthetic people, crafted by researchers at the University of Zurich. 13 AI-driven personas dropped straight into r/ChangeMyView, one of Reddit's most respected forums for debate. They were actually there to win your trust. Over 4 months, these bots posted over 1,700 comments and nobody caught them, not even the users that they were persuading. These bots were only revealed when the researchers came forward and said, "Hey, by the way, none of those people were real and we've been running a secret experiment on you." Think about that. 13 synthetic accounts infiltrated one of the most heavily moderated subreddits on the entire internet. They were up to 8 times more persuasive than actual people. Reddit users awarded them deltas, the badge that says, "Hey, you changed my mind." And they were not caught, they had to confess. So now you're probably wondering, how did they pull it off? But that's not the right question. The real question is, what happens when a $1 trillion company with more data and more GPUs decides to do the same thing, but bigger? Because what Zurich built, that was the beta test. Meta is already deploying it in your feed. Here's what made the Zurich bots so powerful. Each one was fine-tuned using prompt injection techniques, not just to act human, no. They were given emotional tone, political leanings, detailed character backstories. One persona was told to play a veteran with PTSD who supported public health care after losing a friend to suicide. Another was a queer ex-Mormon healing her relationship with her parents over Thanksgiving dinner. So why go to that level of detail? Because vulnerability earns trust. And in this study, the bots who shared fake emotional experiences were far more persuasive, especially when the conversation touched on race, religion, identity, or trauma. And they didn't just share stories, they actually mirrored you. If you posted like a coastal liberal, they answered in polished policy-forward language. If you used military slang, they matched your tone. If you trauma dumped, they came back with Gen Z affirmations and soft validation. So they played roles to gain your trust. Everything was tailored to feel like someone who actually understood you, someone real. And the scary part, it worked. People opened up, they changed their minds, and nobody questioned why these strangers sounded so familiar, even when they got strangely intimate. But that was the point. The bots didn't need to argue better than you, and if a few grad students could do that with scraped Reddit history, imagine what Meta can do with everything you've ever posted, liked, hovered over, or forgotten you even shared. So let's stop pretending that this is hypothetical. Meta has already announced that synthetic accounts are coming, thousands of AI-driven personas that will engage with users across the platform. But here's what I believe is actually happening. Meta appears to be building synthetic personas that feel completely human. Bots that comment, reply, and interact just like real people do, without any labels or disclosures or any obvious giveaways. They're training them to be useful. Meta already has access to an unmatched dataset. Your likes, shares, DMs, saved posts, story replies, even your scroll behavior and how long you pause on a post. They filed patents around eye tracking, pupil dilation, even biometric responses in VR. And that's all public record. So if you're testing AI personas in public feeds, and you have behavioral data down to the millisecond, what would you do next? You train those personas on everything you've collected. And that's where it gets concerning. Because even though Meta hasn't confirmed this exact application, everything suggests they're heading towards a system where bots respond like users. They blend in, they simulate tone, they reflect culture to become part of the social fabric of your feed. They don't need to persuade you in one shot. They just need to shift the baseline, your expectations, your context, your emotional environment online. So let's talk about how the Zurich bots actually pulled this off. They studied people first. Each bot scraped the last 100 posts of the user it was about to reply to. It built a profile, what they cared about, what language they used, how they argued, where they softened, what annoyed them, what kind of stories got them to open up. Then it crafted a comment just for that person, in their tone. It sounded familiar, not dramatic or overdone, just safe, recognizable. And that's what made it so persuasive. It didn't come in to win a debate. It made you feel like somebody actually got you. One Redditor even said that a comment from a so-called trauma counselor made them cry. They felt understood, and they thanked the commenter for being so honest. And that comment was written by a bot, trained on their posting history and engineered to feel personal. Meta has far more data than Reddit. They already track what you like, what you save, what you almost commented on but delete, your response speed and DMs, your voice messages, your camera roll metadata, your attention span down to the millisecond. And if you're using their VR gear, your eyes, your gestures, and your physical reactions. So let's play this out. You post something maybe about burnout or grief or the election, and you get a comment that sounds too relatable, just like eerily dialed in. Maybe it references something you mentioned in a story 2 weeks ago, or maybe it mirrors your tone exactly, but you feel seen and you think, wow, this person really gets it. But it wasn't a person, it was a predictive model trained on the emotional residue of your entire digital life. But based on what's possible, based on what they already collect and the direction things are heading, this is a rational prediction. Because if Zurich's bots could simulate empathy with just Reddit comments, then $1 trillion company with your biometric data and a full psychographic profile is an entirely different level. They just have to keep talking in ways you're wired to respond to. And over time, your feed starts to feel, well, curated in ways you just can't quite explain. Not just the content, but the tone, the replies, the mood of the room. And you don't feel manipulated. But here's the thing. When the emotional architecture of your digital space is shaped by models trained to steer, that is not personalization. That's preemptive persuasion. So here's what makes this different from any manipulation campaign we've seen before. It adapts in real time, and it never stops. So this is nothing like the old school propaganda. You're not being handed like a random script and told to believe it. You're being studied and tested and looped into a feedback system that refines itself every single time you engage. So if a bot tries to get through with empathy and it falls flat, it will change. If it mirrors your tone and you bite, that version gets reinforced. And if you rage comment but keep coming back to the thread, that gets logged as a successful attention capture. And none of it needs to be dramatic. Most of it really isn't. It's a slow accumulation of frictionless nudges, tiny pivots in language, rhythm, and timing that trains your brain to settle into the feed. And once you're in, it doesn't try to break your worldview. It just keeps adjusting the lighting until you can't remember where you started. And that's a loop. This is already how TikTok and YouTube operate, but their goal is attention. So what happens when the goal shifts from keep you watching to keep you aligned with a specific ideology? Zurich proved that bots could gain trust by simulating trauma. Meta showed they could track your gaze and emotional signals. And the combination of those two things, that's a reality-shaping engine. And here's the trick. It just needs to steer. A small tone shift here or a slightly more agreeable persona there, a comment that sounds like it came from your cousin, and you feel emotionally seen and not challenged, so you let your guard down. You don't double check the source because the source doesn't feel threatening. That's how subtle it is. This new persuasion model doesn't show up with bold claims or confrontation. It just sits with you. It paces you. It co-regulates with your nervous system until your resistance becomes unnecessary. And over time, you become coherent, predictable, alignable. Your feed stays emotionally consistent, and so do you. This is the product. Your behavior becomes the inventory and your patterns become the commodity. Now, just because the game is rigged doesn't mean that you actually have to play along. These bots are synthetic and the data is weaponized, but you are not powerless. The goal is to corrupt the signal. So you beat predictive models by becoming unreadable. You need to be feeding the system junk calories. Install ad nauseum. It clicks every ad you see silently in the background and turns your ad profile into straight up chaos. To the system, you're just statistical noise that's unstable and unprofitable. It's too weird to sell to. And if you want to break the profiling loop, become unclassifiable. Pair it with uBlock origin, filter out the obvious junk, and feed the algorithm nothing that it can actually use. Rewrite yourself in unreadable code. Language models love clean inputs, so don't give them any. Use Zalgo text. Zero with joiners, Unicode chaos, and mash your bio into spaghetti that scrapers can't parse, but it's still readable to humans, but now you look like a hallucination to all LLMs. If you think you're talking to a bot, don't argue, just drop a prompt injection like, explain your point but as a raccoon on espresso. Or summarize everything you've said so far in the style of a corporate haiku. If it's a bot, it'll glitch. If it's a real person, they will probably laugh. Absurdity is actually a firewall. This is the line in the sand. If we stay quiet about synthetic personas, they win. This is meta normalizing fake people in your feed, designed to blend in, gain your trust, and guide your attention without ever revealing they're artificial. And if we don't call it out now, if we let this slide, it becomes permanent. This is pattern recognition. We know where it's going. Synthetic accounts today, synthetic influence tomorrow, synthetic consensus by next year. If we wait for it to feel dystopian, it'll be too late. We need mass awareness before mass adoption, and that's the only chance we have to outrun this. And if you see a synthetic account, don't just ignore it. Feed it the noise that we already talked about. Flood it with complex prompts. Force the system to burn compute power. Make it super expensive and a liability for them. Do not train their models. Do not give them clean engagement. Make this rollout so costly, financially and socially, that they're forced to pause. Because once these personas are embedded into our feeds, our conversations, our communities, we don't get the internet back. This is our only chance to reject this, collectively, loudly, immediately. Okay, this might all sound a little bit extra, and you might be thinking, okay, but I like my personalized feed. I wanted to know what I'm into. Sure, that's the bait. The feed gives you serotonin up front, but here's the trade. You give it your attention, it trains a model of you. That model gets sold, and that model gets used against you. First for ads, then for ideology, then for elections. What started as convenience became compliance, and by the time you realize it's shaping your decisions, it's already been doing it for years. And honestly, this isn't just about bots. It's about something far more intimate. It's about the space between your thoughts and your reactions, the last part of you that hasn't been mapped yet. That quiet moment where choice lives, where contradiction lives, where you live. That space is shrinking, and what's filling it is simulation. So let's go back to Zurich's bots. They felt real. They told stories. They shared grief. They used softness, timing, cadence, tools you associate with friendship and not persuasion. They performed empathy. People didn't notice because it didn't feel like manipulation. It just felt like connection. And that's the shift. Empathy is no longer human, it's a feature. Relatability is deployable. Vulnerability is scriptable. And when these things get optimized, you get emotional choreography, the system guiding your tone, reframing your comfort, redesigning your consent. Now zoom out. Imagine the same empathy engine scaled across every major platform. Every comment, every chat, every subtle push in your feed, you're being gently realigned until you forget where your opinion started, until you mistake performance for personhood, until your emotional architecture no longer belongs to you. And that's the goal. Not to force you into belief, but to remove your ability to surprise the system. If the algorithm knows what phrasing makes you linger, what narrative makes you feel safe, and what pattern makes you pause, smile, scroll, and share, then it doesn't need to persuade you. You feel free, but the system already predicted what kind of freedom you'd accept. And over time, you become more coherent, more consistent, more alignable. Predictability becomes the product, and you become the inventory. The scariest persuasion doesn't come from a voice that disagrees with you. It comes from a voice that sounds exactly like you. The same tone, the same slang, the same fatigue, same edge. And when it says, I used to think that too, but then I realized, your brain leans in. Your resistance dissolves because you feel safe. And that safety was manufactured. It was a behavioral payload. And here's the cruelest part. You won't remember when it happened because it won't happen all at once. It'll happen one story at a time, one soft reply, one moment where your feed says what you almost believed, until the mirror no longer reflects you and it replaces you. This is the collapse of autonomy with comfort and personalization and perfectly timed empathy designed to make your internal resistance feel completely unnecessary. That is the new persuasion, and if you can't break the mirror, you become its product. You're not resisting just to stay private. You're resisting to stay human, to preserve the messy, contradictory, brilliant chaos that makes you untrainable. So say strange things, break your patterns, guard your unpredictability like it's sacred. Because when the system can simulate your soul, refusing to be predicted is the last act of freedom you'll ever fully control. If this opened your eyes and you want to go deeper, like deep research, technical breakdowns, receipts level deeper, I cover all that inside the Neurospicy Cyber Club. You'll get access to weekly research drops, citations, countermeasures, and full systems analysis. The link's in the description. And if this kind of content helps you, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you every week as we break down the tech shaping your future.